For a status update, and I just left programming list, we left that on there for design and building concepts and assistance with community engagement, because I see that as being an ongoing thing that we'll be working through. So it's just to leave it on there, but we thought we'd give a status update on there. We didn't have a quorum. It was just a brief meeting that Baker orchestrated with Patrick to let us know, what they're going to provide us, and we'll be receiving in the next couple of days a scope of the work that Patrick at Cardo will be doing for us.
Okay, that's
based on the donation, and then there's a phase 1 and a phase 2. Nick was in that meeting, Lexi and I, Baker and Patrick. So it was just to give us some initial insight as to what would happen next. And maybe, Nick, you could kind of elaborate on some of the points. Well, Tiffany, you were there too, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was listening in.
Did he give us any guidance with regard to additional information that this committee needs to provide to him?
I can give
He's going to give us that update.
So, just to build off of Lori's comments, so we did have a very initial conversation with Patrick. Really, the goal of that, as was stated, was to get to the point where he can develop a scope of services proposal. As was mentioned, that scope of services proposal will likely have 2 phases. It may have more. So just, I think it's important for this subcommittee to know what each of those phases might be. So phase 1 is going to be basically everything through your master plan. The development of the master plan and submission for approval. So that's going to be the community engagement steps, the review, through that and
approval to town board.
Yes.
Okay.
So phase 2 is going to be what he termed as zoning update and enforcement process. That's going to be where you take.
Can you say that again, please, Nick? I'm sorry.
Zoning update and enforcement related process.
Yeah.
I had related next to it, I guess. So that is going to be a couple different things, of course. But the main piece for your all information is that's going to be the point where you will take your master plan. You will then start to do a very similar process, if you recall, those that were on the subcommittee earlier with the design plan. That was what we did with the design plan. We did that on a kind of a smaller level. We did a lot of that zoning enforcement and update step by taking the stuff that was in the design plan and updating our zoning ordinance. So that would be what will likely be called phase 2. That I don't know that won't be maybe broken out into a couple phases, but I just have it written as phase 2 because I had that as what comes after. I had confirmed with Patrick that likely the scope of services will have both of those phases referenced. The donated services will take us through phase 1, just so everybody's aware. But a lot of what was in the phase 2, just understand that we had budgeted for that. We had planned that. We've had been ongoing planning the idea of reviewing the zoning code, updating the zoning code. We've called it an audit. You've heard that term a number of times. We have monies budgeted for the phase 2 activities already, depending on, of course, what that all entails. There may be other components of it, but we do have budgeted monies to cover the zoning code audit and update. A couple different additional notes that I would just note is, so as a general update, it is related to this, so I'll say it. I also see it's later on the agenda as well, but it fits here well. So recently we, of course, reviewed and updated the ordinance to unify the non-use controls. Understand that as we kind of did that, we laid foundational work for some of the work that Patrick will be doing, when he's making recommendations. In other words, he's got a nice unified baseline now to make some recommendations. We didn't give him a lot of direction on that because I think we want him to give us some thoughts on, on what he thinks would be appropriate. 1 district, 2 districts, what exactly that looks like. Important thing at this point is that we've unified those non-use controls. We've given a nice, clean baseline. So he can then work with that. make some recommendations and get us to that phase two. So I realize that's skipping it forward a bit, but I just want to, kind of pay nod to the idea that the work that you did really will lead us to, some of this, and I think will be an effective way of approaching it. So he's not trying to sort through all those things that you did to the table. It's nice and clean for him. He's starting with a nice, clean baseline to make those recommendations from. He had briefly talked about two other things that I think are worth mentioning. One would be timeline. Timeline now, I'll take us back to phase one. That's going to be the primary timeline we're talking about at this point. Timeline for phase one, I think he's going to be aiming for 4 months is the timeline for phase one. But he did say that it might be 4 to 6 months, I think is what he said, but I think his aim is going to be for 4 months. I suspect we'll see that in the scope of services. Yeah. I just want you to all be aware of the timeline that he was thinking of.
And I do think, if I could just add there, when he talked about that 4 months to 6 months, the 6 months was including phase two, which we had already planned would be a better part of this year to go through all our zoning code. So I think just going back to what Nick was saying about a baseline, we have often talked about here at Plan and at Town Board that this is leading us down a path that whatever we do here is going to make it easier further down and maybe not cost as much. It just solidifies the thought process as we go through everything. So when he says 4 to 6 months, he's talking the entire master planning overall, including those zoning code updates, because it's going to take us a while to get through all of that.
Yeah, so I think if we're talking about phase two as well, just
right.
So I'm managing everybody's expectations, I think
right.
that there's still some openness with what phase two is.
Right.
So I personally don't think I'd feel comfortable saying that we're looking at that.
No.
For completing phase two, because we all know what goes into the zoning code review and update. I think most importantly is to know that he's at least initially proposing about a 4 month to do phase one, but he had talked about 4 to 6. To Lori's point, I think the 4 to 6, if we talked about the 6, we'd probably be talking about phase one and maybe starting phase two. I
right.
don't think we would want to
get through all
think
of it.
that we're going to get through phase two in 6
That's not
months.
realistic, yeah.
Couple other things that came out of that discussion. In phase one, he did just briefly touch on that. Likely his scope of services proposal will have, or scope of work proposal will have some references to stakeholders. I know that's been a big thing that's come up. So the idea of how that community engagement takes place and maybe number of them, he had talked about maybe 3 or 4 times throughout. And
holy cow!
Just understand that means he called it engaging 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you're holding public forums 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
That can mean other forms of communication.
The invitation of the stakeholders.
Say that piece again, Nick. I just want to
piece-
write it down.
Hold on a second. Before
Yeah.
I go back to that, I want to keep
Oh, yeah.
finish my thought here. The key
Sorry.
piece here is that I think the fact that we have somebody that's done this process before in a number of communities.
Yeah.
He's got the ideas down, and good ideas for how we can do that engagement. The engagement isn't setting up the community room 4 times and getting inputs, right? I mean, that is not what 3 to 4 means. 3 to 4 means, ongoing communications out to the public on where we're at and where we're going.
Okay.
But I just wanted to point out that he's looking at it as throughout that process, about 3 to 4 community engagement points, through that.
Okay.
I think I had one other one, because Diana asked that question. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. You had asked if there was anything that he needed from us. So we had that conversation, and so he received from Lexi design plan, zoning ordinance, and comp plan. So he's got some of those.
Can you please say that one more time?
Yes, design plan, zoning ordinance, and comp plan. He's got those. He's not going to do a deep dive
And
into
maps.
them, and maps. Yes, sorry, and maps.
That's
He's not
from
gonna-
the design standpoint. right,
it-
from the comp plan.
That's on the,
Those maps?
yeah, the future.
But also our
Or
zoning.
code maps.
Yeah,
zoning
when I
maps,
call
okay.
it zoning ordinance,
Yep,
zoning
yep.
ordinance is map and text. So
Right,
I just,
okay.
I'm sorry, I
Yep.
gloss over that.
That makes sense,
it-
yep,
It's important to know that maps too.
okay.
He's going to do a high-level overview of them, just to be familiar with them, and then work on his scope of work proposals. So he had asked for those to then generate the scope of work proposal. He had estimated by Friday, but I think just Lori's comment is probably a better one. You know, I think we'd expect it by early next week, is the scope of work. But if he could get it to us by Friday, certainly that would be great too.
He also has, the other maps I gave him the Rome Town Center maps with acreages on the available land. Most of the available land. I think there was one tiny parcel I couldn't give him acreages on because it was just too small for me to put it on, but.
It's the map that Lexi gave us originally when this subcommittee
Yep.
started, so.
Not the one that has the subdivisions that Sam gave us though, just the one that has just, the one that's currently adopted in place.
Did he indicate any way with regard to the community engagement, what media or what he would propose that how we were to reach the community?
We
Was it just
anticipate
going to
that
be
coming-
through our website or?
No, he didn't speak
Yeah.
to that. He said that that would probably be part of his scope. And he's done
Yes.
this, yes, so it would come out in the scope. But that would be whatever he's recommending, that we would, whatever other ones we would want to do. But I'm sure there would be, if he's going to give us the communication plan on how to reach out 3 or 4 times, I'm sure with his experience and knowledge on how to do this, and all those other communities listed on their page, I think he knows what he
I'm
needs to do.
assuming we did emphasize that we need to reach out to the business community.
Yes, we did.
Okay,
Over and over,
I'm sure.
over
sure.
and over.
And I'm sure he's done that before.
Yes, he has. In fact, he even spoke to the fact that he understands, you know, sometimes when things are being fully accepted or not, and some want it, some do, and
Yeah.
how to find the balance to
Right.
make the community happy overall, because it's best for overall, the overall community. So he even touched on that without even any prodding from us. What, did you have some ideas, or do you want to wait for
Well,
the scope, or?
Whatever the scope, from what I see, sometimes people aren't even aware the town of Rome has a website.
Well, I don't know how to get that message out.
I know,
but-
Jackie says it at every board meeting.
Yeah.
You know, but.
And you can get signed up, you know, and I get the text messages, you get the emails. Now we've learned that the email has a hiccup. They're working on that. That's gonna take time, but
Is that why
And-
is that why I get 2 of everything again?
that's a problem with Town Web, and you'll need to report it to
And
Taylor.
I know everyone gets that weekly Rambler or something like that. If he's thinking of perhaps the town spending a little bit of money and putting some kind of advertisement in there, or just say, you know, just something very little. We're still working on the Rome Town Center. We're short, whatever. He knows what he's doing, but I think perhaps doing something not just on our website, but direct people to our website with that kind of an
We could
ad.
provide that from the
Well,
subcommittee as
I
a report
would-
to that.
I don't know.
Report.
And I would maybe just recommend that, you know, where our conversation was just to get him to the point where he felt comfortable to generate a scope of work.
Okay.
Yes.
Right? Then I think the next step, the ideal next
Is
step
implementing it.
would be to receive his scope of work
Yes.
and maybe set up our next meeting at a time that works for him to join us with, you know, WebEx or whatever the virtual attendance would be. And then you can ask those questions if he hasn't really delved into that and you know, and get an idea of what his approach is. But I think really the only, you know, real purpose for that initial conversation with
scope
him was so he felt comfortable in generating a scope
Okay.
that was something that we would receive and we wouldn't be like, well, who is this for, right? You know, it was to talk about kind of where we're at,
Right.
what we have, you know,
Right.
where we are looking to go, you know, those kind of things, so he can put together a tailored.
So he knows he's not starting at ground zero.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's really what the goal of that introductory meeting. I wouldn't even call that meeting a kickoff meeting.
No,
A kickoff
it wasn't
meeting
either, no.
Would be a meeting
No.
that.
After the scope is
That you
listed.
all have with him,
Yeah.
you know, to really take a look, so you'll at that point have his scope of work in front of you.
Yeah.
You'll be looking through it. You may have all of these questions. Of course, you know, if they're not answered, you know, you could ask him and get a little bit better clarity on it. And I think that, you know, really was the goal of our earlier conversation, was just to get something, a document prepared for you all, so you could see kind of what that scope is, broken out in those phases. It's just to talk him through, you know, kind of what we're looking for.
Okay.
I have
And
two
as far
notes.
as, sorry.
I have two notes that I took away from it that I thought were super important. I mean, one thing that he said that I really wrote down is that he's not trying to look at everything super, super close, but he's also not trying to be, like, withdrawn from the town, which is super important. He's not trying to, like, look at everything with a magnifying glass, but he's also not trying to be 50,000 feet away, which is what we need. And another thing that he said that spoke out to me as someone who went through a bunch of planning classes is that he's trying to plan for resiliency, which is something I actually questioned him about, is how's he planning for resiliency versus sustainability, because there's a huge difference. I took a whole class asking about the difference. And he has a lot, he gave me a really good answer about how he's planning for resiliency versus sustainability.
You want to share it right away? Really quick, or?
Well, I took a couple of notes on it, but I was trying to, I guess, absorb a lot of it. But he wants, one of the big takeaways about, I guess, what he wants to do for us is he wants to lay out a framework. So if there are businesses coming in, if they fail, something happens, we're not overselling land to them. Places can come in, take their spots. If things fall through, we can just slot something else in there. We're not just
Redesigning.
We're not just
Right.
It's
Yes.
keeping
Which
status
was
quo.
very
not business
Right.
specific.
We're
Right.
building up
It's-
something
it's
where
more
it can keep
generic.
building on
Across the
itself.
street.
Yes, it's not just a generic thing where we're just trying to get people to come in. We're trying to build something where people want to come in, and we're just giving options for more people to slot in versus just, hoping things come in. We're just trying to build something for more people to build off of, and it's going to work itself up and make itself into its own working system versus just something that we're trying to put years into ourselves.
Because it sounded, I caught that too, and it sounded like, he's been faced with this sort of thing before, and you can see it on their website with how they're planning that one area, where it's like they plan for an area that's completely empty, and then how did that expand to the rest of it? So it's how do you encompass that? And the other thing that was a key takeaway for me with Patrick was his experience and what he's doing and the types, he's building town centers, he's building what communities need. And he said a lot of those ideas that they originally started back with in the 50s and the 60s, I don't remember the exact years, some of those things are still what people follow today when they're planning town centers. Maybe you caught some of that too, Tiffany, but
Walkability.
yeah. And why
Living
those
above
ideas
shops.
still resonate
Density.
today. I would say it
I'm
again.
sorry.
No, I didn't hear what you said because
Density,
my ears are ringing
living
bad
above
today.
shops, walkability. It's
Yes, all of the
same
things we've been
things
talking about.
I've been out there for a long time.
All the things we've been, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and as far as his community buy-in, this is what he does, and that he specialized in small towns, and so I think he's really going to be able to help lead us in how that looks as well. Because I was sitting here questioning, all right, how are we going to do the community buy-in? And he kind of touched on that.
Yes.
And so that was nice to hear, is that he's done this, he has experience in it, so he's going to be able to lead us really well in what we're saying and how, and he kind of, I think he touched on that, he comes in and he's part of that too, so
Yeah.
that's really nice to know.
That was my other question.
Did you guys have anything else you wanted to share with the group as an overview of that or discussion? Did we cover everything pretty much? I think we did. Does anybody have any questions? Any more questions? I think Lexi can put out a pretty good report with the notes you took too, because I think that was good that you went into detail for us, because that jogged some things I remember him saying too. And sometimes when people that do this for a living and work on it on a regular basis, they say things, you can't write it down fast. You can't write it down fast enough, and it's like, but that was really good point, and it's like you want to hang on those key points, because that's why we have people like this as resources, and to get something like this, we got to maximize, because this is pretty exciting. So, Did you have any other questions, Diana? Or?
No, I just went back and all of them that I did have
Are you sure you got all your answers?
Well, I don't, but that, until we get the scope of work, that's probably when I'm gonna have a lot more questions, or hopefully have a path, a clearer path, you know, so
Where
I'm,
is it gonna direct us?
yep,
Yeah, I agree.
yep. So until we get that, then, and I'm looking forward to it.
Did you have anything, Bill?
No, I need that scope.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think I'm excited to see that scope, quite frankly, I am. Did you have that other, what do we have here, number 8?
Yep, which is current RTC use controls, method of potential paring down, and consolidation of RTC sub-districts.
So everybody got those copies that Sam sent us, and the one was from South Milwaukee, and one of them was from the Village of Mount Pleasant where he works and lives, although he does work in other communities. And he's also on a board of zoning appeals, I think, for the Village of Shorewood, outside of Milwaukee too. But these were just to start giving you an idea. These are in no way, shape, or form the magic bullet to what we might want to do here, but there's some good guidelines, and I think they offer some really good ideas on things that we could consider in paring those uses down. And Nick, if you want to.
Sure. Well, I kind of teed it up in my original update, but just note that a lot of this is provided because I think it is something that you can review and reference as we go through not only phase 1, but then into phase 2. As I said, a lot of the work that we'll do, when it comes to updating our zoning ordinance is going to come in phase 2, right? So again, as Lori said, this isn't, neither of these are the one, right? I mean, that's not how this works, with any of them. As you know, they often have components of things or themes that are ones that are really good. I think both of them are great examples. Both of them have elements that we may be really interested in looking at and maybe incorporating. And I think the idea here is to just review them, as we go along here. Use them as, mark them up if you like a component of them, not necessarily the uses they have, but a component, how it's laid out. Note those things, so when we have that conversation about, updating the zoning ordinance and really going through phase 2, we're not starting at square one, right? We've got a little bit of background, because I think one thing we saw with Patrick, we're going to get the best service when we have an idea of what we're looking for. And that's why we had the conversation with Patrick, and I think that's why Sam's, kind of walking through some of the preliminary steps with you, from those 15 recommendations, and giving you examples. It's not because we're planning on taking anything to the Plan Commission, when it comes to use controls anytime soon. It's because we'll be having this very discussion when we get through the master plan.
I've started this process probably prematurely, but I think I need a mindset as I'm going through all of this stuff, as far as, I know we're not going to be able to get rid of all of the conditional use permits. Our goal is to pare it down significantly. Is that correct?
Probably, although it's somewhat going to depend on what the recommendation and what you end up doing with consolidating your districts.
Yeah.
So
One district. If we're looking at
so
one
if we're looking
district.
at one district, then there is likely going to be a dramatically different set of uses, right? They may be more general. I think some of those are, significantly more general. And then there's a process in place to review and kind of define exactly what that's going to be. And so it's hard to answer that question. I get where you're going with it, because you're trying to set your mind, around where we're going, right? I don't know what the answer is, because I don't know that we've established exactly what that's going to be I get why you're asking it, and the answer is yes, we'll likely have a fairly significant adjustment to our use controls. But what that adjustment looks like is going to probably depend on if you have one or two districts, because if you have only one district and you have an area, you have to start asking, well, what are our uses in all these different areas? I think you're going to have, some different ways of defining it if you have only one district, because you may have only one district, but you're gonna have pockets of spaces in that one district that are still going to have, I think, preferences or direction. It's not just gonna be a grab bag. One thing that we had said to Patrick, or I said this to Patrick, was, one thing that we've done to date, and I think it's been our challenge, has been, we've had people come to us, when they want to buy something, and they have an idea of the business. They tell us, we need 20 acres or whatever they tell us. And they may not need 20 acres, but, we don't have really anything established, to know where that might go and how much acreage might need to be, associated with it. I think part of this process is going to be unifying, and part of it is going to be setting up what exactly this looks like, whether that's, maps and overlays, or just the larger master plan. I think will probably get you there.
I think the most realistic land sale of most recent has been for the development of the container village.
It's a resort.
I think that's the most realistic land sale we've had. Everybody else has overbought land.
It's been a challenge with that, and I think that was when he gave an answer to Lexi's question. The thing that I appreciated with him was his approach was one that looks to right size our development.
Right size and then get density, because that's what we lost.
Those are things he
We've
talked
lost the
about, we
density.
talked about there,
Yeah.
and he did touch on, because he understands, because I said, we've said in meetings, we only have so much land, we're not gonna grow any more there, and as long as we own it, we gotta plan it right.
Right.
So, and
Good to know I'm
he's
on the
very
right page.
familiar with that. What did you say?
I said it's good to know I'm on the right page.
Yeah, and I think maybe I look at it too simplistically, but I'm kind of at the same spot like Lexi and Nick are, and I understand what you're saying and where you're trying to go with it, Diana, but I look at it too, if we take this down to one district, two tops, the rest of it's gonna flush out, and it's gonna it's gonna look different. We can't pre-plan for conditional or permitted uses yet, because we don't know how many districts we want, and those other things will get flushed out when you get further down the line. I don't think we'll have a total, complete vision until we agree to do that after he comes back with his recommendation. And then if we decide on one or two, then we go from there with the permitted, but the state is getting us to get away from conditional uses. It has to be something very extreme that you put a conditional use on. So, and if you've got one district, that list is gonna really compress,
So-
even with permitted uses. It did,
Yeah, so one other thing that was part of the discussion, is just briefly mentioned, but I think it does relate to this, so it's worth pointing out. In giving some of the background, as I had given Patrick some of the background that we've done in this town, I did point out how many different sub-districts we have. When he had, because I think he had actually mentioned the 1 and 2, so he's in the mindset, right? So moving to phase 2, I don't think will be, totally outlandish to the discussions you've had. He knew what we were talking about. When I mentioned 9, he said himself that was probably a lot. That was probably too many. And I think he himself said 1 or 2. So
he did. He said 1 or 2, yeah. That's what he said. And, it's interesting, we're seeing a common theme here. And we've heard it from other resources, and I'm humble enough to say that they do this for a living, so I'm not as smart as they are. So if they're saying that if it came from the person that did our zoning hub, says, wait, you've got way too many, and then you get it from your land use development planner telling you that, and now we have a professional that plans all around the world, in the US, telling you that, I guess I'm pretty comfortable in following their advice, that this is the smartest route to take for something that is gonna build a vibrant destination and livable space for people here in our community. That's just my humble opinion, but I don't know, Lex, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think there is quite a few. I feel like a lot of them do similar, if not the same things. Like if you look at Mixed Town Center and Commercial A, a lot of the uses are similar, if not the same. They could be condensed together. Same with like, if you look at like mixed multifamily, that could be similar, if not the same, to senior living. They have similar uses. They could be condensed together.
That right there makes the list compressed.
Yes, that gets rid of, right there, 4 different districts, smushes them down.
No different than the use controls
Mhm.
being, you know, all the same in uniform. So
Even if you go through like the non-use controls, when we were going through them, we saw how similar those are, and just by paring them down and saying, look how they're all uniform across.
is it correct to think, is it correct to think that even with the non-use controls, those would be condensed even further if we go down to one district, right? I mean, it's the same type of compression as far as,
It might, again.
it might, yeah.
Right now, unifying that gives a nice
Yes,
baseline.
framework, baseline.
I just don't wanna speculate on what we're going to get, because I don't think we told him, give us one, right? We wanna
Right.
hear feedback on what exactly the recommendation is. I mean,
I'm sensing he's gonna look at the original plan, he's gonna look at the code and the uses, and he's gonna say, you didn't change your zoning to agree with what you have in that plan, that design plan.
I don't know if he'll go that much into a deep dive. Sam is more the guy to do, I think that's
Okay.
just what I
All
think.
right.
He's giving us an overall master plan.
my guess is that phase 2 will be taking phase 1 and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
going through the process of updating the zoning code.
Are you gonna
which
go
is-
to the curb or not?
Which is, again,
That's
I'll just
really
remind
the
you,
issue.
that's, we did that on a more basic level when we did the design plan to
Yeah.
the codification. That's
Yeah.
kind of what we did. Now that would be led by, either Sam or Cardo, or probably both.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna make a
I'm-
comment.
I
The way
have
I'm
something else.
integrating it is that
Different issue.
Patrick is our architect, pie in the sky kind of a guy that wants to give us what we want to see. And Sam is going to be our reality person, the project manager that is going to bring us back to reality based on what our architect has given to us.
That kind of, yeah, that's a
It's
good
kind of how I'm
analogy. That's a
way of
good,
looking at it.
Finding it, trying to,
it's a good analogy, yeah.
That is a good way of looking at it.
my daughter works with architects. She knows how they are. Oh,
Very-
but
it'd be
he's-
wonderful,
Yeah,
yes,
but
it would.
I don't
but-
think you're gonna get that from him, though. His background is architecture, but he's a certified planner with the American Institute of Planners. So, I mean, he plans communities, he plans town centers, and he comes into that's his forte. I think he didn't, that's the bad
He
word,
spoke-
but.
He spoke about it, he talked about, I think when he was introing, kind of, his background and his approach, he had talked about, some of that and said that his business is really about in the middle of that.
Yeah,
So there's an architecture and there's planner, and then
Yes.
his business has really made a niche at coming in right around the middle of that. So I don't think we're going to see progressive pie in the sky.
Okay.
In fact, one thing that I said, and those that were at that call will remember this, I'm sure, in one of his answers, I said, old school, I like it. I think,
Yeah.
That's my approach too. I don't like when the plan is really wildly unrealistic and just not, you can't picture exactly how that will implement here. His approach is not that. I think his approach really is, from everything that I heard, somewhere out in the middle of architecture and planning. And I think that will lead well, still into how you said that will fit. I just think it'll be more towards reality when you're starting.
I think it's more realistic with someone like this that is old school and he fits right down the middle of the road, because he's not the pie in the sky type. He really isn't, and I don't know that Sam Valley would be willing to pay for something like that either. They need something that they can substantiate and what's gonna be resilient in the communities that they're building, and we need something that's resilient here, that we don't have to come and do this every 5 to 10 years.
So this 4-month window of
Can
phase.
Lexi just ask
Sure.
something first?
I mean, I guess as someone who went to school for this type of stuff. It's kind of like, it's a weird spectrum where it's like, what I went to school for, I'm more of like, we're more of like, my specialty, I guess, is more in the middle, where we're half are on the artsy type side. We're also very science-based because I did a lot of earth science stuff. The architects, they are a little more on the artsy side because they have to be more creative. They have to do a lot of problem solving, which you're forced to be creative when you're doing types of problem solving, which is how, yes, you are going to have to do a lot of pie in the sky type idea, but they also have to be logical because you have to be logical when you're creative. But they are still engineers at the end of the day. They're not going to try to lead us astray. He's not going to try to give us an idea and try to make us into like Milwaukee. He's going to try to look at other small towns and try to lead us in a way that's
Been successful in other
Yes.
small communities, like that Thompson Town Center or the one at Rodeo Dunes.
And the same with like Sam. So I think working together between the small towns that Sam's worked with and small towns that he's worked with, I think they're hopefully going to get something that's in the middle. Because like I've been saying, Rome's very unique. We're not like an average small municipality where we have aspects that are small town, but we also have aspects that are not your average small town. We're somewhere in between. So between the two of
Rural
them,
urbanism.
yes,
Rural urban, and that's what the state government's starting to call it.
Exactly
Once we
what
hit a
we are.
certain population, we'll be right there at an urban town.
yes,
But they're kind of, we're in that category, that's how they treat Rome.
yes.
As an urban, although we don't always qualify for things, that would be nice if we.
So it's kind of like we kind of need that out there thinking, because we have aspects that we don't see in those with all other towns that have populations the size that Rome has. We have a lot of aspects that are not seen in those types of populations. Because I'm thinking my hometown has a lower population, but still similar. Nothing at all like Rome.
One thing Sam said, and it's stuck in my mind, and I wish I had written it down, but something about, yeah, people don't want growth, but if you don't have some people don't want growth, but if you don't have certain kinds of growth, Sam said it in a really good way. I got to go back and listen to that meeting, but you can manage your growth that it's right for your community. Somehow he said that. So you've got to have growth to have growth. You know, otherwise we'd be stale. It's like a stream with no rocks in it. You know, it's like, but granted too, if you keep throwing rocks in it, then you dam it up and nothing happens. You know, so
Don't be a beaver. That's what you say.
So I think it's kind of useful. And I think it's kind of useful because I mean, obviously, I'm not like a crazy experienced planner or anything, but I have a little bit of planning background. They both are planning background, so I think between all
The
three of
three of you.
us, and I also have my Rome background coming in now too, with me being here for a little bit. I think between the three of us, we should be able to get something super cool happening.
And just one final, found him to be very down to earth, a very real person. And he's like an old soul type person too. That's why I think.
In a very young body.
Yeah, well, you can have that though. I mean, you can have old souls but I mean, it's not gonna be, I'm not concerned that he's gonna come in too lofty and we can't achieve it. I think he's already been given enough background from other sources like Michael Baker and us, that he's going to be more realistic. But
With regard to the 4-month timeline on the master plan, is that from the time he will be developing the master plan, giving us the master plan, we will have our 3 to 4 whatever
Stakeholder
engagements, and come up with, we will be done by 4 months to get to phase 2.
Or 6.
Well,
They never want to be put in a can. Too many things can come up.
so after the scope is given to us, hopefully, early next week or sometime next week, then we will look at the scope, give him more feedback, and he'll start to begin developing the master plan.
And when he's done, when it's finished and adopted, then we have direction. Then there is a direction for the Rome
So the
Town Center.
adoption of the master plan would
That's
be
the goal.
4 to 6 months.
That's what
Okay.
we're doing.
Okay, just wanted to
And
find
then you
out.
go into the, how do we change our existing code to match what?
But I also believe
More
both
heavy.
him and Sam and Patrick, I got the impression that some of that can be done along the way. with the code as far as if we go down to one, if the master plan comes out and we see that one district or two district is possible, there's no reason why we can't start that parallel work. That one doesn't have to wait for the other and
Okay,
nothing
that's
gets
good to
done.
know.
Yeah.
And then,
You know, it's parallel,
I
did you
think
get
they-
that sense too?
Yeah, I think they touched on
we've
that
said
and
this
said,
before.
yeah, that you have to make changes along the way.
Yes.
Because otherwise, where you, I think really what they were alluding to is it's a cart before the horse or a horse before the cart type
Yes.
situation. And so if you don't make changes along the way with your zoning, you're at a standstill then. You have this,
Right.
but then you don't have that, and you have to have the two to coexist.
And
That's a good way to say
understand
it.
that we probably, had we not approved the non-use controls, we probably would have been doing a lot more of that
Mm-hmm.
along the way. Again,
Yep.
what we did was some pretty significant foundational work,
Yep.
whether everybody recognized that or not.
Or is willing to
In
recognize
every,
it.
you know, in every facet of this government.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you that what you did was laid foundational work to avoid, you know, a significant amount of overlap, but yes, this stuff will overlap. You would have been doing that almost immediately, just to get at a baseline at square one had you not done it. So, that kudos, you know, to everybody that worked on that, and got us to that point.
So I'm into phase two, just a couple of questions, because I do want to formulate how I'm going to be perceiving the one or two districts. These are all of our uses right now, in all the districts, and whether they're conditional or permitted, but these are, we have 65 of them. Are
In
we,
all the town center districts or all the districts?
That's
this
the
is Rome
town
Town Center, I'm just dealing with them. I don't want it the 300 or whatever we have in other ones. So, as we're looking at this, and we're thinking about it and going to, you know, the other items that we've been given for reference points, should we be looking at this as these are, everybody that has these designs on coming into our Rome Town Center will be able to come in? They will be permitted.
Maybe not,
Maybe not.
I wouldn't
So
go
we're,
there,
we're
I
gonna
wouldn't
go
go
through
there.
this.
because I don't want any more storage units in the Rome Town Center.
I don't think that's allowed anyway, but,
I don't know. I believe it is, because
It
we
is,
already have
that's
them.
because you have that already.
So I believe
You have
it
that
is.
with nonprofits, and you've got one more that has, first right of refusal on a large
So
parcel.
there's some changes that have to happen.
They're not commercial storage units, though. So, just so we're clear.
right,
Yes, they're
it's
not
not
commercial.
storage units, so
But
those
there's-
aren't
yeah,
allowed.
but there's,
But we have.
I'm not sure what it says.
Yeah,
I
we
didn't
have,
look at that.
I mean, we have, yes, the back area
Right.
of,
We've relegated 14th Avenue to storage.
Nonprofit storage units.
Yeah.
Where does,
They call them storage units, they call them their storage buildings.
what
There's
is
one business that
the
has
zoning
storage.
back there, mixed commercial, light industrial?
Yep.
Yeah,
probably,
And they get storage units.
yeah.
not commercial, but they're storage for their.
And is that permitted, or was that a conditional
I haven't-
use?
I don't.
I don't remember. Yeah, I was on. the
Let's
last
go
one.
back to your, I think we're clouding it though. Go back to your
Well,
original,
I
I'm a
just-
little confused as to why though. Go back to your original question, please, though, because I think we're getting off track maybe
I know
with the
where she
storage.
said it, but go, yeah, I think
Well, what
we are
ex-
getting off track.
Okay, sorry, I was just,
No, I've got it off track, not you. I'm sorry.
I am just trying to
You're trying to
understand
figure out
how
how
I'm going
conditional
to be
uses.
approaching a
versus-
single zone, RTC,
Yep,
with allowing permits, but allowing
but maybe,
65 different
maybe you don't
types
want to
of-
allow 65.
Okay,
That's the
so
point.
if they're not on this list, if we decide we're not going to allow any of this in RTC, they will not be able to build,
Correct.
okay?
If you don't put it in to the zoning,
So-
if you don't put it into a permitted use.
Okay, so, as an example, art gallery museum, right now it's conditional in A and Mixed Town Center. So if we allow art galleries and museums in this one zoning district, it'll be permitted with no conditional uses,
Right,
anywhere in the Rome Town Center.
Nobody is saying that you're not going to have any conditional uses. I get what your questions are. I think your questions are probably best. Let me phrase this again. You're going to get a
Trying to
scope
be
of work.
diplomatic, I know
You're going to
it.
get a scope of work, and you're going to have a kickoff.
What did she say?
Okay. I get where the wheels are going. The wheels
Stop
are
turning
going,
them.
though, in a place that I don't know that we can answer them
Okay.
until, you can ask the question.
So I shouldn't even
But
be looking at this
look
right
at
now
the
when
scope
we're
of
about
work.
it.
Figure out where, which it's phase 2 is where you're in.
Some of it's
You're in phase-
parallel, some of it's parallel.
I don't know about that. I think.
That's where we
I think
are,
a lot of
and
when you're actually
Maybe we
saying
wanna
the
get to something like
uses,
this.
you're talking about what he classified in our conversation as phase 2. Okay, so I don't even want to talk about parallel. I'm saying that is in phase 2.
Phase 2.
So look at that scope of work, go stand right for phase 2, because that's where your questions are. See how he proposes it, and when you have your kickoff meeting, you can ask some of those questions, and he'll, I'm sure, have an idea of what that might look like. Sam would likely as well. But again, you're asking phase 2 questions,
Mhm.
and I don't know that anybody here, I could give you some general ideas, perhaps.
That would be
But-
helpful, an example maybe?
Well,
General
general
idea?
ideas would be, if you put it into one district, you may have some guidelines within that district. I hesitate to call it an overlay, but you're going to have guidelines in that district that guide where these uses are. You may have them then as permitted.
Retail living.
You may have them then as permitted or conditional. I don't think anybody should be talking about eliminating all your conditional uses, but there are reasons for significantly paring them down because of Act 67.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Right.
But we're not eliminating conditional uses.
Yeah, I
Nobody-
didn't mean to say we
nobody should
eliminate
be
them
going-
completely.
Leaving, here thinking that
That's not what I was saying at all.
conditional uses go away, right? And so when you say like this is gonna be allowed, it depends, right? It depends on how many districts you have, like I said. And then in that district, if you have one district, you're likely going to have concentrated types of development still identified.
Yep.
It's not gonna exist as sub-districts,
Yeah.
but it is
Okay.
going to concentrate your development. It's just gonna be it's gonna look different than what you've seen.
Do I understand you correctly? That's a good way to maybe help people visualize it too, especially if you're a visual person like I am, but it's like, to explain it to others as well, is that once we get down to 1 or 2 districts, whatever that might be, recommended to us or suggested, and we agree on, then if you're concentrating on the types of development you're interested in having, which is what the master planner will help us with, and both him and Sam can help us then just figure out the code that might go along with that.
And so the reason why I say that you may have some overlap.
Am I thinking that right, or
Just let me be clear though on one thing, because the reason I've been so
Don't use
hesitant
the word
to
overlap.
agree to the idea of this overlap, and why I said you'd have a lot more overlap if we wouldn't have laid some of the baseline. Understand that the reason we won't have a ton of overlap is because you have to develop your master plan and identify where these concentrated developments are. Cart before the horse, it was what he was talking about. You need to get through your master plan, you need to get that adopted and approved. Otherwise, paralleling and saying, well, this is where we're working towards, but then all of a sudden, something comes out differently, perhaps in the master plan, or it's not approved, or whatever, wouldn't make a lot of sense.
I understand what
So-
you're saying, Nick, but when I say parallel, I meant that if something comes up in the master planning process, that's something that we can work on and think through.
Yeah,
Be it the 1 district or 2, and then going from the concentrated development uses, something might come up that we have to work on presenting for change.
Potentially,
That's,
but-
potentially it's there. But it goes back, isn't it go back to some of the ideas that we've had where we might want, we're gonna have mixed uses. I see, and I'll be interested to see, going through what our initial work was, is you have retail housing, then you might just have all housing over there. Or you might have services, retail, and housing, or you might have, so we just don't know until we get to that, through phase 1 with
Well,
him.
Go back to your Pinterest, when we were doing that Pinterest exercise, you saw examples of concentrations of development.
Mhm.
This picture
Right,
is,
right.
taking this out of it, this was a picture.
From
the
our
background
design
is
plan
a
manual.
picture of concentrated development. This type of development is a, you know, one concentration of development. It still may exist in a single district if that's where you all wanna go. But again, I do think that you may have some parallel, and you'd have had a lot more had we not done the work that we
Well,
did.
I
have a vision
appreciate him
of
saying that,
Timberline
though.
with 2 rows on either side of the road like that. That's my vision.
Yeah.
That's where I've been heading with this.
And so you're going to identify where those things are, that's the master plan. You're going to then, in phase 2, start putting some code to that. And so that's
That's what I
best
meant
way
by
of-
parallel, is
Yeah.
putting some code to that and then moving forward from there in
Right.
phase
You
2.
you need that vision or that plan before you can do the other stuff.
Yes, and I guess looking at Mount Pleasant stuff, something I guess I started envisioning is, I mean, I guess paring down the conditional uses a little bit, and once I started looking at Mount Pleasant, instead of getting our ratios of conditional uses down, and instead, not really getting rid of all of them, but getting permitted uses with more conditions on them
Yes.
versus.
Yes,
That's
that's
kind
the
of
way
what
Sarah
I want to
said
do
it
it
That
as
was
well.
where I was gonna ask this question.
Because
if
I see on here
about
that there's
this.
there's permitted uses, but then there's also in certain areas, there's permitted, but it's upper story only, or in a certain area only. I feel like that's more useful than just having.
Yes.
That's concentrating.
Yeah.
development.
Yes.
That's exactly what
that's
I've been
concentrating the development.
visioning
Yes.
is our map may almost look like it does now, where it's one district maybe, where it's mixed town center. But then within that, the permitted use with conditions. In northwest corner, you can have mixed residential. In northeast corner is the mixed residential and commercial, where you have the businesses on first floor and second floor is the only way you're permitted to have residential. And then in southwest corner, you can have things like a car sales place, a canoe sales place, because that's not something we would necessarily want in our business area, our walkability. I wouldn't want to walk through a dealership. The salesmen are awful.
Except on Sundays.
Yeah, except on Sundays. But maybe that's something that we're okay with over in this area that was previously pegged light industrial. And so that's where I'm kind of thinking of okay, it could just be this one district, but then we have these permitted uses with conditions. This is
Yes,
a
that's a
permitted
good way to
use,
put it.
and the condition is exactly where.
That's a good way to keep putting that and get it through our heads. That might help us with our visioning too. Correct me if I'm wrong, we have permitted uses with additional conditions. That gets
Yep.
away from conditional use permits. We may
Yep.
still have some. We can't get rid of them completely, but we'll have all these other things that are permitted,
Yeah.
but they'll have conditions set on them.
Yeah,
Right.
and it makes it so easy when people are coming in too, because you can say, okay, well, look at this. Is it a permitted use within the conditions? And if it's not, then you need to make a pretty good argument for why you should be granted a conditional use permit, and it better be a really good argument.
There you go. That's
And
perfect.
to that point, I think I was going to say it probably is a way of folding in with the town center, then, some of the work that we do in the site plan of operation currently.
Mhm.
We have it almost going through as two runs currently. If there's a conditional use, requirement. This might fold that all in and put it all, consolidated into a neater process, in that regard. Because I think to get to the answers that, that
Mhm.
Tiffany brought up, you'd have to almost put together your plan of operation.
Yeah.
Justify, right? If it's something that's outside of this, how that fits, right? And so I think that's your plan of operation.
Yeah. Does that help more? Does that?
Yeah, I think I said that 2 meetings ago, though, but that's okay.
Well, key thing, a lot of what you're thinking about is phase 2.
Okay.
So when you get the scope of work, if you have those kind of ongoing questions and you're looking for maybe what Patrick's approach is proposed to be, I can tell you it'll be in phase 2, because that's, the questions you're asking are phase 2 questions.
Okay. So, at what point, and I know there are people that are already asking about land sales and things of that sort, at what point in this process would an RFP be able to be generated?
At the end of the plan, when the plan is adopted.
Okay,
Once the plan
Well-
is adopted, you have a direction, and that's how.
the master plan, you're not
The
talking
master
about the
plan.
zoning or anything else?
I'm talking about the RTC master plan.
Okay, so that could be 4 to 6 months?
Yep.
Okay,
You don't have to wait for the zoning necessarily to put out an RFP, as long as you know what direction you're going, and that it fits within your plan. Does that make
Okay.
sense to you? I mean, that's, you don't have to have the zoning detail. But you could, if there's a developer that comes in, you say, well, we might be changing something
Well-
relative to the zoning, as long as you know that you're heading in that direction, but
if the
it
permits
depends on how it's
that
gonna
we would be
affect
authorized,
the
now this is
developer.
all zone 2, so
Depends on how it affects the development.
I guess,
I mean, because if there's someone coming in for land sale, they're still gonna have to go through plan commission. I know that they're coming in. Realistically, I would know that I need to get that into plan commission before they're coming to plan commission, and I need to get that to.
but
With
isn't the plan
sensitivity
commi-
that's all confidential
Yep.
when it's coming through as a offer.
Yep.
As you're
Yep.
aware.
Yep.
So it's going through CBA confidentially.
Yep.
And being negotiated as a purchase, if we're talking about offers that come in.
Yep.
And so it's a little bit more delicate than just sending it off to plan commission, because we can't really do that, unless we're just doing it conceptually. My thought is you're probably talking about potentially overlapping end of phase one into phase two.
Should-
You might have
That's right,
end
I
of
see
phase
it
one,
too.
right as you're at the point of adopting. You could also generate the beginning parts of what an RFP would look like, once you get the approval of the plan. I think you do want the plan to support where you're going, right? But
Yes.
you could overlap that a little bit in the development of what that RFP might look like. I don't think you'd release it, to Bill's point, until you have
You can't.
the master plan approved. But you might have almost all the bones in place, so you.
So is there an unofficial moratorium on land sales until we finish this plan?
There hasn't been any moratorium, but I think it's no different than if you're building a house or buying, making a major investment in your life. You're gonna have all the pieces in place before you do that.
Before you
And I
make
think
that
with a
offer.
limited amount, and even somebody said, Baker said it, and I think either Sam or Pat, you have to have viable development. We can scrutinize what does and doesn't go in on land that we only own so much of, that's left. Because as we know,
Okay.
our plan the plan has not been, and we want this to go,
Generated yet,
we want to grow smart. So one or two of them, Baker, and I think Pat said viable developments. Maybe it was Sam. Sam said it, I think, at our last meeting.
I like that.
So we have the right to have that discretion and slow things down. People just coming, that's how we ended up with what we have.
Yes.
That's how we've ended up, not that any of it's bad or any of it's really, really good.
It could have
and
been
some of it's
better.
great, it could have been better.
yeah.
Is that we just willy-nilly here, there, everywhere, did this fit, didn't it fit with these permitted and conditional uses, 7 acres versus 2 versus 5 versus 6, and it didn't go very well. So to me, it's worth the time, especially with this kind of investment as a gift, that we take our time and we do it smartly.
Well, and
If somebody's just coming, it's like, oh, I
potential
gotta
is
have this because I'm gonna build you housing.
Well-
Well, is that the housing we want? Is it where we want it? Is it, what are housing sales like right now for that type of house? We've got an expert real estate person here, so I don't see the need to run. I mean, to rush.
And because of the development
everyone
of
in
Sand Valley.
town
things
hearing
have
this?
changed in 5 years.
Yeah, things have,
Drastically.
right, things have changed
They
in
have
5 years,
changed
so
a
our
lot.
needs and our interests are evolving. And
For what are the needs of the community?
what are the needs and interests of the community?
It's morphed.
Yeah, and we have every right to take the time to do it smartly, and we should. If somebody comes in and says, oh, I could
think
do
that
this
answered
in,
my question.
huh?
That answered my question. But I have another one.
Oh, Bill,
On the south wall.
I need a cookie.
On the south wall, the way they got down here, I couldn't figure out how they got down there, and then I started reading through the definitions.
Yes,
They use this as setting their conditional uses for all practical purposes.
Well,
Am I-
conditions,
It did,
not
like
conditional
sexual
use.
Or
orientated
their-
businesses and,
What was permitted is based on the definitions.
Right.
Not necessarily what's on this page.
It goes back
Okay.
to what Lexi and Tiffany said, and
Okay.
apparently Diana did 2 meetings ago, but I must not have been listening, but
what does
But
this,
permitted
oh, I'm
uses
sorry.
with conditions. So the conditions are spelled out, you can read them. You don't have to look at a map, you don't have
Right.
to look at a chart,
Right.
you don't have to look at.
I couldn't figure out how they got down, and then I started reading the definitions, I
Yeah.
said, oh, that's how they did it. They defined it.
Right,
And 15 pages of definitions on
Yeah.
native plantings.
but
Which is a lot.
I
Which
was
is
like,
a
that's
lot.
a little overkill.
I know when I got into the native plantings, I'm like, are they serious? I mean, it's like maybe obnoxious plants for us, but.
I know they had, how many
I didn't
pages?
say
Holy
this is the way to
cow.
go, I'm just asking a question to try and clarify.
No,
Where I was
we're
heading
just
with
joking
this.
about the pages of
I know, I
plants.
saw
That
that-
was
I saw the
pages
native
of plants.
Actually, it's
mean-
more than 15,
Oh, boy.
20.
But, and I liked, like we said, these are examples that came from
24.
Sam, and granted, one's South Milwaukee, one's Mount Pleasant. They could be another framework to help us build what we wanna build, you know, it gives you an idea of how you can put those conditions on permitted
Yeah.
uses.
I do like seeing this because we have touched on the native plantings, and I think that's really neat to get back,
Yes.
bring back what was here.
Yes.
I think that's really neat.
Not
Do we
15
need
pages.
24
Well,
pages? Because
not-
that's how many are here.
that's only
24, I
South
just
Milwaukee.
counted.
Those are the native planting stuff.
They're in
Yeah.
a different zone.
Yeah, there's mandatory and optional, you know, maybe there's a way to, overall bring a synopsis of what the native
I think
plantings
our
are.
comprehensive plan had some,
Well,
Detail
at
on
that
that.
December 3rd meeting with the solar people, the guy, was he from the DNR?
Yes.
He said they have a whole list
Right.
of native
they're- it's
plants
not rocket science, I'm
Just-
sure they do.
just for our area,
Right.
That was
specific
be
Just
an
for
our
here.
person, I don't know, yeah, I think he belonged to them, I had never met him before, I don't know
Yeah,
where.
so I thought there's something out there that we can utilize
I-
as,
We could ask them for the list, I'm sure they would give it to us,
And as I'm thinking about it
I'm
with,
sure there's something,
you know, and this
It's
is
not
kind of maybe
rocket
lays out the
science.
picture of what are some of these
Concentrates again.
permitted use with conditions. So maybe one of the overall conditions for all of, maybe it's one district that we come up with that, you know, and then it's all from there, the permitted use with conditions. And then it's, all of your plantings, all, is it, I always get this backwards now, perennial and
Annuals.
annuals.
Come
And-
up you have to replant them every year.
Yep, so
Perennials come
those
up
could be
every other-
non-native, but then anything that's perennial must be native.
Yep.
And, you know, so it gives that flexibility, and then, again, that helps feed into what do things look like? What do your planters look like? What do your trees
Yes.
look like? And so it helps continue to paint this more detailed picture for me of where we're going, and I really like that.
well, I like the fact that palm trees can survive in snow.
Yes.
So can bamboo. Certain
know
kinds
that.
of bamboo.
Yeah.
you
Not
don't
the
know that
ones
for
from
a fact.
Southeast Asia, though.
The
We
long-term
tried.
effects
That's
on palm
right,
trees.
you don't know that. Let's wait and see.
Yeah.
We're not used to getting.
I'm sure the geckos
8
were falling out of the
inches,
trees.
Bamboo is sustainable.
I'm sure the
It's
geckos
resilient.
didn't make it.
And you can make flooring out of it.
And
Well,
they
you
call-
can
they
make-
call
you
the-
can make
they call
animal
the
crossing.
snowblower hoarder
Going off track.
crazy in Florida.
What was
50
he
years
pointing,
ago.
what were you guys pointing out, though? Was it something on this chart that would help all of us, or you were just,
It was actually a good example of the answer that I was giving Diana earlier. She had asked so that South Milwaukee one has,
A greater than sign.
and then it has a greater than sign. She had asked what a greater than sign was. It's in the.
in the definitions, or whatever?
It's in the section below the table. And what it's doing is that greater than sign is concentrating the development to only certain areas. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Mhm.
It would identify where those areas are, and that's what that's doing when it has it. So it's an example of what they're doing to concentrate certain developments, in the areas where they identify them as appropriate.
This really helped for me. This really helped organize in my brain what it needed to look like.
If you can look at the one too from Mount Pleasant, they've got a chart
That one?
online in that link, yeah, with the colors.
Mhm.
And they kind of, surprisingly, and that's not even where, but surprisingly with our use list, I divided again, I just picked them to combine them, to make it simpler for us to look at and think about, so we had a visual aid. They do similar in their E-code
Yeah.
with their areas and their, you know, what they allow, like arts and entertainment, housing, so they combine theirs in a little bit different way than this one.
Yep.
And I thought they were both very good. I think that might be why Sam gave us both.
I think so. I think the key takeaway from that is to see a couple examples of how this is framed.
Mhm.
I would approach this as there may be really good things about each of them.
Mm-hmm.
Identify what you like about those things, because when we get to the point where we're talking about codifying, some of the things that are in our master plan, having that as your starting point puts you ahead of this, ahead of the ground floor. You're already in the mindset of things that we maybe be looking for. So.
And I think the one thing that they're both very good, and they both give us a really good idea of what a framework can look like. What I liked about Mount Pleasant, I'm just, for my simple self, I like to keep it simple, stupid, if you can, is they named the areas. No letters, no numbers, this one for South Milwaukee is a little bit more because they've got a lot of different zones and they're using letters, and we did that for R1, R2, R3, like in our town. But here you're talking about specific uses of the area and what might be in that area, back to what Tiffany was saying. It's like they divided it into different categories, which helped me understand how we might group things together. So that one really helped me. But this one is very good too, but again, it's all letters and but both of them, again, provide good framework to help us.
Are we going to then have, I hope, as soon as possible, after the scope is available, have a,
Yeah, that's, if we schedule our next meeting, does anybody have any other questions or comments, or, maybe one thing we can do, I don't know if it's helpful if you haven't already, is just how ours here would fit into something like one of these, right? I mean, if you have time and you want a little bit of homework. I don't know, some of us have no lives, but.
I'll do it on the plane tomorrow. I'll do it on the plane tomorrow.
Where are you off to this time?
something?
Colorado, and it's gonna be cold.
Oh, you're moving
Just
your
a-
daughter?
No,
right,
she's
because
out there
there's-
already.
okay,
We're going out there
yeah.
just for the weekend.
Oh,
Try to get the kids
nice.
out there every 6 months.
Oh,
Because she's too broke to come back here, so.
Do we have a tentative next?
And
meeting
wedding
date?
dress shopping.
No.
Fun. For your daughter?
Her, yeah.
Oh, I was like, what are you holding
I
back?
think
God,
we're trying
no.
to wait till we get the scope set one.
So we're gonna just leave it open until,
We receive
Yeah.
the scope.
Well, if we want to set a tentative date for next week, in case people's calendars are getting filled up, and you
Yeah.
do want to meet to move things along, because I know some people still work full-time. Some of us are retired full-time, and some of us have no lives, so we'll just wait for these things.
some of us have both.
Yeah, some of you have both.
What is the date today?
The 23rd.
Okay, I can go anytime next week except Friday. So I'm pretty open next week. Fine.
Thursday would be the most open for me. And but assuming we probably want to try to aim towards the end of the week.
Right.
Because the scope probably wouldn't come until earlier in the week at best.
Yeah, if we don't get it by tomorrow, which he seemed like he was like on this.
And it
like he
depends
was
on
really.
his schedule too, Patrick's.
Right, so later in the week, Thursday
Thursday.
works.
I think you want to come up with a few different options.
Yes.
Because what
If-
Lexi's going to have to do is send that to Patrick and see what his availability is.
Correct.
right? Because that's the critical.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I was gonna
I was
suggest, that's
thinking
why I
that
put
when
on
you
there
get
dates
it,
and times.
And we get it, you still want time to digest it before we meet.
So I don't know, do we want to just wait till I get it back from him, then I can ask him what times he's available, and then I can go
And then
from
shoot out
there.
an email.
Then I can shoot out an email and see what times
Okay.
you're all
Yeah, I
available.
think
Yeah,
that's
that's
a better
How about we
idea
do
than-
that for her right now? What is the first, that
'Cause
first week? And
I'm just
we know
thinking
Thurs-
about from when he contacted us about meeting, he seemed to be available more so in the later afternoons.
Yeah,
So I just don't know, and most of us seem to be available more so in the mornings.
Yeah, except for Thursdays, we had a couple at 2:00, but, you know, what date, we know that Thursday works, and if we could do it in the afternoon, if he's available, but then what about that first week? Is there anybody not available at
In
a certain
February?
time? Yeah, that first week in,
Well, the 4th, I know they're having that voter forum
right, that would be a bad day.
Yeah.
in the afternoon, so any other day
Mondays,
is
I'm not.
fine with me.
Unless it's early in the morning.
What about that Thursday or Friday, the 6th or 7th?
Fine.
I'm gone.
The Friday.
Both days?
Yeah.
And I don't know that you necessarily
We gotta
need
get outta here.
for a kickoff meeting.
And what about Wednesday, the 5th? How does
CDA
that,
is that day, but other than that,
so we could do it that day. We
Is-
can have 2 meetings in one day.
Oh, we moved CDA to Wednesday the 5th because you're gone.
Mhm.
I'm glad you just said that because I forgot to change it. If it's not in the Bible, it's not happening. This is what Tiffany's life ends up looking like.
And you do it in pen, are you brave?
Yes, because if I do it in pencil, I can change it. And then I don't, like things like my family, they don't happen. Yes.
I understand that.
And so-
Transitory.
so,
Yeah.
other than
It's too easy
CDA.
to-
Maybe just as a tentative, throwing it out there, and then you can see if Patrick's available that day too.
Mhm.
So like Thursday, the 30th in the afternoon, or Wednesday.
I can do Friday in the morning,
The
the
31st.
31st.
What about Tiffany or Bill?
I'm open
Yeah,
Thursday
oh,
or
I
Friday.
have something in here, I forgot. Friday, I am not.
Okay.
I have closings, showings, and I have to pick Dan up from the airport.
On
Okay.
Wednesdays, I'm available after 2.
So then the 5th, it would be after, what about before?
It'd have to be at 8:30, 9 o'clock.
I'm still in my jammies.
Yeah, well, I know, that's why. But I have commitments on every Wednesday. You know what it is.
Oh, I forgot. I forgot about it.
I can do early morning too on Wednesday if that would work out for everybody else too.
Yeah, I can't.
You can?
Does
No.
Wednesday, the 5th in the afternoon work for you,
Afternoon.
Tiffany?
Before CDA, yes.
Okay, we could do it before CDA. It might not be
Is-
that
Time
long.
is CDA, 3?
Yeah.
I could push it to 1:30, but that's the earliest I can get it.
I
The
think
only
that
other-
would be,
Yeah.
we shouldn't need really more than an hour and a half.
Because we're gonna have to try and, we might not all be able to be here either, so we're
Yeah.
gonna just have to do our best to accommodate everybody's schedules, but we
Mhm.
gotta. So just throwing dates out there to see when Patrick's available too, but now you know that people only got the Wednesday, the 5th open.
Well, the
For
30th,
the majority
right?
of,
In the
we have the
afternoon?
30th.
So the 30th in the afternoon, Wednesday the 5th in 1:30.
Unless we plan, since that's an odd day for Plan Commission that day anyway, we can make it for 4. It doesn't have to be 3. If that's allowed. So I think, yeah, after 12 that, or you said 1:30 that day?
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
could, I
after
mean, we could do the
1:30, yeah.
5th after, I just don't know how long CDA is gonna run, I mean,
It's not that big of a meeting, is it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I mean, could do after 4, nothing says we can't. I'm just,
I could do it after 4.
I could too.
After 4 on the 30th?
The 5th.
The
The
5th.
5th? Oh, yeah, anything after 1:30 is fine.
okay,
We'll sign my
We can
mom
do-
to the kids.
so we can,
Say anything to Patrick, anything after 1:30 or after 4. As long as we don't run over 2 hours, I think we're fine. If we stick to an hour, hour and a
Yeah, I
half,
think
1:30 would work.
so I'll ask him on the 5th for either after 4 PM or after 1:30.
Yes.
1:30 is preferable though.
Okay,
And 30th in the afternoon, but that might be cutting it close for our getting the scope.
We understand,
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
if by chance you get it tomorrow.
yeah, if I get
Then-
tomorrow the
then
30th.
ask
Then the
him-
30th would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, then follow up right away with what is its availability. on the
Sure.
30th. That's how I
Yeah.
would do
Mhm.
it.
Okay.
If it comes in next week, I'd probably be looking at the 5th.
Since everybody's so popular, what about the week of the 10th too, just in case? Throw a date out there.
I'm pretty open. Wednesdays are always, that's kind of regular day in the office. I teaching a bunch of classes through February to our new agents.
The 11th, we're busy,
Well, that's Plan Commission at 4.
and then we have the Adams County thing you
I
wanted to go
pref-
to.
The indoor
yeah, I
market
forgot
is
to
on
put that on my
Friday.
calendar. Remind me of that, so I
The
can get it
indoor
on
market
there.
is the 14th.
Is it the second Monday? I thought it was the first Friday of the month. That would be the 7th of February.
Right.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just picked the dates off of the thing that the that the Rometown posted.
Visit
I
Rome?
thought I got the right ones.
Well, okay, I always thought it was the
Well, we
first Monday
can
of the month.
just see what happens, and then I guess we'll have to scramble from there and just see if you don't want to pick anything that week.
I would
But
prefer
have-
not to do it the 10th. Well, actually, we're not going to have that big of a meeting for Plan Commission. So I won't be using Monday
We have something down in Adams County that day.
on the
On
10th.
the 11th.
On the 11th,
The 11th is Tuesday,
yeah. So,
but the 10th is Monday. So the 10th would be fine for me.
I'm,
Anytime on the 10th.
Monday, Tuesday, I'm gone.
You're gone?
Both days. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday till 1:30.
So we can just plan for the 5th, and I can just always poll and see.
Or, unless it's the evening. Evening
well,
time.
like I said, if we can't all make a meeting, it might just be,
Worst comes to
but I hate
absolute
to
worst.
see anybody have to miss, but.
Mhm. Worst comes to absolute worst, if something comes up and we're preferring, I don't know, something more in the evening, I can always do a 3CX meeting and just bring my laptop home and do a meeting from my bed.
Well, I don't know. Patrick probably quits at 5.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
true.
that we gotta, we gotta think about his schedule too and
Mhm.
be respectful. The 13th, I have something in the evening, but during the day on the 13th, which is a Thursday, or Friday, did anybody have issues with those 2 days, just in case?
Well, Friday's Valentine's Day.
Yeah,
So?
the 14th. Well, so, some of us are still romantic.
You. What is that? I'll buy myself flowers.
I'm available on that Thursday or Friday if anybody else says anytime.
Yeah, Thursday, Friday during the day is open for me.
13th or 14th.
You're already out 3 days, so if we're gonna try to accommodate everybody,
Yeah.
So that's
I
we've
think-
gotta, if we're gonna
Two-
keep the
that's-
group
I think
together.
just set
3
it and
weeks.
Whoever can make it, can make it.
Yep,
That's,
That's 3 weeks. I will be gone March. All of March.
can you dial in at all?
It depends on what's going on down there.
Okay.
So I can't,
Understood.
Guaranteed.
We'll just have to schedule, and if you can join us, you can join us then. So we gotta keep phase one moving,
Mm-hmm.
so that, we can get that out and get community engagement going too.
Yeah, the important part is going to be to have your kickoff meeting.
Yes.
Sooner than later, so we
Yes.
can
Yes.
put a timeline. And once you have that timeline, it's gonna be a lot easier to have some idea of what's going on when,
yeah.
and you'll be able to plug in meetings around it.
Alright. So then I will see what his availability looks like.
If he happens to come up with the 10th, or unfortunately the 11th, and we have to miss that, I'd rather not, but
Mhm.
we'll do our best to work around everybody's.
It seemed like his availability was, he was pretty flexible.
Yes,
Yes.
he was.
Particularly with, remote attending. and-
Yeah.
Yes, it just seemed like the afternoon just worked better. That's all I noticed was the
Perhaps,
afternoon
yeah,
seemed
but
easier.
I just think he seemed to be pretty flexible to
Mhm.
join and have a meeting, and so I think it'll be easier actually than you think to get him.
Mhm. Perfect.
I think next agenda items, we'll just leave that open for now until we see what we get from Patrick, so it'll
Well, I
probably be
would just
reviewing
say
the
next
scope.
agenda-
Scope.
Next agenda item is
Is
reviewing
yours-
scope with Patrick. yeah.
Right.
Use
Okay.
scope with Patrick. Perfect. Alright. And then, that being said,
You're the scribble queen, huh?
Yeah,
alright.
I should just type it all, my fingers get sore.
That being said, I guess I'll
Rome
adjourn
Indoor
the
Farmers
meeting
Market, the
Yeah.
at
14th.
12:24
I'll be darned.
PM. Woo-hoo.
I always thought it was the first Monday